in the heart of the American Southwest, long before European explorers set foot in the New World, a civilization thrived. The Ancestral Puebloans, once known as the Anasazi, built monumental cities deep in the desert. Their most impressive achievements can still be seen today: Chaco Canyon and the cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde.
But despite their great cities and centuries of success, something happened. Almost overnight, they vanished. The people disappeared, leaving behind only empty homes and towering ruins. What drove them away? Was it the earth itself turning against them? Or was it something deeper, something we still don't understand?
Archaeologists have uncovered roads, astronomical alignments, and signs of trade reaching far beyond their homeland. The scale of their accomplishments is staggering.
But behind every discovery, there are more questions. Why did they choose to build here, in some of the harshest terrain imaginable? What were their lives like in these remote cities? And most mysteriously of all, why did they leave?
Over 2,000 years ago, the ancestors of the Puebloans began their journey into the Four Corners region. By 1200 BCE, they had settled in small villages, adapting to the dry, unforgiving landscape of what is now Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado.
Imagine arriving in such a place. The land is harsh, water is scarce, but they thrived. They learned to farm, growing corn, beans, and squash. These crops became the lifeblood of their early society, allowing them to settle in one place, to grow roots in a land that seemed impossible.
Small pit houses, built partially underground, provided shelter against the elements. Over time, their villages grew. Communities spread across the high desert, connected by shared customs and traditions. This was the start of something much bigger.
You can almost picture those early villages. Smoke from cooking fires rising into the clear desert sky, families working together to survive. These humble beginnings were the foundation of a culture that would soon transform the landscape in ways no one could have imagined.
By 900 CE, the ancestral Puebloans had transformed their world. At the center of their civilization stood Chaco Canyon, a vast complex in the high desert of what is now New Mexico. Chaco wasn't just a city, it was a hub of culture, trade, and religion, drawing people from hundreds of miles away.
What made Chaco so special? Was it the place itself, or the people who built it? The canyon was dry and desolate, yet they chose it as their heart. Here they erected great houses, massive stone structures that rose from the desert floor, some reaching 5 stories high, with hundreds of rooms.
Their construction was precise. Buildings aligned perfectly with the movements of the sun and moon, suggesting a deep understanding of astronomy. Roads radiated from Chaco like spokes on a wheel, connecting distant communities across the Southwest.
Imagine the pilgrimage to Chaco, travelers arriving from faraway villages. They came for trade, for ceremony, maybe even to witness the skies. What power did Chaco hold over them? Was it a place of peace or something more? Something that demanded their reverence?
Life in Chaco Canyon revolved around both the practical and the sacred. The people farmed corn, beans, and squash in the canyon's limited soil, using irrigation to make the most of what little water they had. Food was stored in massive rooms within the great houses, ensuring the community survived through hard times.
But it wasn't just survival. Daily life in Chaco was rich with culture. Pottery, jewelry, and tools were crafted with skill and care. Beautiful turquoise pieces have been found, traded across vast distances, showing just how connected they were to other cultures.
The scale of trade in Chaco was immense. Goods flowed in from far beyond the desert copper bells, from Mexico, seashells from the Pacific coast, even exotic feathers. Chaco wasn't isolated. It was the center of a wide and complex network of trade and influence.
Picture the roads filled with travelers, bringing goods and news from distant lands. Chaco's people were more than farmers and builders. They were artists, traders, and spiritual seekers. What did they talk about as they sat around their fires at night under the endless desert sky?
Chaco Canyon's great houses are engineering marvels, especially for a society without modern tools. Massive stone walls, some over 30 feet high, were built with sandstone and timber. But the mystery lies not just in their size, but in how they were constructed. Thousands of trees were harvested from distant forests, some as far as 50 miles away.
Imagine the labor involved. Cutting down trees without metal tools, dragging the heavy logs across the desert, then lifting them into place to form the massive roofs. How many people did it take? What kind of organization was required to create such enormous structures?
Even more astonishing is the precision. The buildings were aligned with the sun and moon, marking solstices and equinoxes. Some researchers believe these alignments were intentional, suggesting an advanced understanding of astronomy. The complexity of the architecture still baffles modern archaeologists.
Why did they go to such lengths? Were they marking the heavens for spiritual reasons, or was it something else? We see the stones, the wood, but what we don't see are the beliefs, the motives, the reasons behind their extraordinary efforts. The answers remain buried, just like many of Chaco's secrets.
At the heart of Chaco Canyon's culture was its spiritual life. Ceremonies took place in kivas circular, underground rooms built into the earth. These sacred spaces were used for rituals and gatherings, believed to connect the people to the spiritual world and their ancestors.
Imagine stepping down into the cool darkness of a kiva, the air thick with the smell of burning sage, the flickering light of a fire casting shadows on the walls. These spaces weren't just rooms, they were portals to another world, where the lines between the physical and the spiritual blurred.
Their ceremonies were deeply tied to nature. The sun, moon, and stars played a central role in their religious calendar. They built great houses and kivas in alignment with celestial events, suggesting that their rituals were not only spiritual, but cosmological. The cycles of the heavens guided their most sacred practices.
But what did they believe exactly? The details of their religion remain elusive, lost to time. We see the remnants, the kivas, the petroglyphs carved into stone, the careful alignment with the sky, but the meanings behind these rituals remain a mystery. What visions did they have in the firelight, and what gods did they seek to please?
By the late 12th century, many people moved from the open spaces of Chaco Canyon to the cliffs of Mesa Verde in present-day Colorado. Here, they built their homes high above the valley, carving entire villages into the sheer rock faces. The cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde became their new sanctuary.
Why did they choose to build their homes in such precarious places, tucked away in the cliffs? Was it protection from enemies, or were they retreating from something even larger? Environmental change, drought, or the collapse of their old way of life?
The cliff dwellings, like the great houses of Chaco, were complex structures. Some had over 100 rooms, built into natural alcoves in the rock. These homes were not only shelter, but offered protection from the harsh desert sun and perhaps from outside threats.
Imagine living in those stone rooms, high above the ground, accessible only by ladders or narrow paths. The walls echoing with the sounds of daily life, children playing, women grinding corn, the steady rhythm of life continuing, even as the world below changed. But what were they hiding from, and why did they feel the need to retreat?
Life in the cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde was both practical and communal. Families lived together in multi-story stone structures built into the alcoves of the cliffs. Each family had their own small rooms, but the community worked as one, farming the mesa tops, weaving baskets, and preparing food together.
Imagine waking up each morning to the view of the valley below, the steep cliffs surrounding you like a protective wall. The daily routines of life were constant. Women ground corn, men tended crops on the mesa, while children learned the skills they'd need to survive in this rugged environment. Yet even in this hard life, they found time for art and tradition.
They relied on the land, growing crops like corn and beans, but also hunted small game. Their food was stored in cool, dry rooms, using every inch of space the cliffs provided. It was a careful balance of survival, with every resource used to its fullest.
Pottery was carefully painted, textiles woven with intricate designs. These were not just survival tools, they were expressions of their culture, their identity, passed down through generations. What stories did they tell as they worked? What dreams did they have for their children in this stone fortress?
The ancestral Puebloans were not isolated in their cliff dwellings and desert cities. Far from it. They were part of a vast trade network that spanned hundreds of miles across the Southwest and beyond. From the Pacific coast to Mesoamerica, goods and ideas flowed through their world.
Picture it. Turquoise from their mines, traded for exotic seashells, copper bells, and brightly colored macaw feathers from distant lands. Their influence stretched far beyond the canyon walls and cliff faces, linking them to cultures across the continent. What stories must have traveled with these goods? These exchanges weren't just of objects. Ideas traveled along these routes. New styles of pottery, religious beliefs, and even architectural inspiration.
Evidence of this trade has been found in their ruins. Beautifully crafted pottery, intricate jewelry, and items that came from distant places. Turquoise, highly prized, was sent south in exchange for luxury items from the far reaches of Mesoamerica. This trade wasn't just about survival, it was about power, influence, and connection.
The influence of Mesoamerican cultures, with their focus on astronomy and ceremonial structures, can be seen in Chaco's design and religious practices. But how much did they borrow? And how much did they create on their own? What drove their desire to connect with faraway peoples?
By the late 1200s, the once thriving communities at Chaco Canyon and Mesa Verde began to show signs of stress. The climate had changed. Prolonged droughts, once rare, became frequent. Crops failed, and resources grew scarce. The land that had sustained them for centuries was turning against them.
Imagine the fear and uncertainty creeping into their lives. The rains they relied on stopped coming. The fields that once provided food stood dry and cracked. The people must have looked to the sky for answers, for hope. But none came. How long could they hold on in the face of such overwhelming odds?
The environmental challenges were compounded by overuse of resources. Trees had been cut down for building and firewood, leading to deforestation. With fewer resources to rely on, the strain on the community intensified. Competition for what little was left may have sparked internal conflict.
Their great cities, once bustling centers of trade and culture, began to empty. Families left their homes, abandoning the great kivas, the cliff dwellings, the roads that stretched for miles. But where did they go, and why so quickly? What forces, natural or human, drove them to leave behind everything they had built?
The sudden disappearance of the ancestral Puebloans from Chaco Canyon and Mesa Verde has puzzled archaeologists for decades. By the late 1200s, these once thriving centers were abandoned. But why? Several theories have been proposed, each offering a different piece of the puzzle.
Some point to the devastating droughts that swept across the region. With no water to sustain crops, starvation could have driven people to leave in search of more fertile lands. But is it that simple? Could climate alone force entire communities to abandon the homes they had built over centuries? Or was it something more complex? Something we might never fully understand?
Others believe that conflict played a role. Evidence of violence has been found in the remains of some sites, suggesting that either internal unrest or external attacks may have contributed to their downfall. As resources grew scarce, tensions likely mounted. Could this have led to a breakdown in their once stable society?
Perhaps it was a combination of environmental stress, social unrest, and spiritual beliefs that led them to abandon their cities. What were they thinking as they walked away from the places their ancestors had lived for generations?
Though the cities of Chaco Canyon and Mesa Verde were abandoned, the story of the ancestral Puebloans didn't end there. Their descendants, the modern Pueblo peoples, continue to live in the American Southwest, carrying forward the traditions, knowledge, and spirit of their ancestors.
Imagine the deep connection they feel to these ancient places. The stones and ruins aren't just history, they're a living part of their identity. The beliefs, stories, and rituals passed down through generations still resonate today, shaping their lives and spiritual practices.
The Pueblo people today maintain many of the customs that their ancestors once practiced. The kivas, the careful attention to the cycles of the earth and sky, the pottery and artistry. All of these are living links to a past that still thrives in the present.
Chaco Canyon and Mesa Verde are more than just archaeological sites. To the Pueblo people, they are sacred spaces. These ruins stand as reminders of the resilience and ingenuity of a culture that, though it faced hardships and change, never truly disappeared.
Over the past century, archaeologists have uncovered many clues about the ancestral Puebloans. Excavations at Chaco Canyon and Mesa Verde have revealed intricate pottery, advanced engineering, and remnants of a once thriving trade network. But with each discovery, new questions arise. Despite years of research, major mysteries endure.
Every stone unearthed tells part of the story, but never the whole. Who were the leaders who organized these massive construction projects? What drove them to align their buildings with the stars? And what spiritual forces guided their lives and decisions? So much remains hidden, buried deep in time. Perhaps that's part of the allure.
Why did they abandon their great cities? Was it a slow decline or a sudden catastrophic event? Theories abound, but hard evidence is scarce. The full story of their rise and fall may never be known.
The ancestral Puebloans left behind incredible achievements, but also an air of mystery that keeps drawing us back. What they built, what they believed, and why they vanished. It's a story still waiting to be told, piece by piece.
The ancestral Puebloans built a civilization that spanned centuries, leaving behind monuments that continue to captivate us today. Chaco Canyon and Mesa Verde stand as testaments to their ingenuity, resilience, and connection to the land.
But despite all we've learned, so much of their story remains untold. The mysteries of their sudden disappearance and the deeper meanings behind their rituals and architecture still elude us. What we do know is that their legacy lives on in the culture of the modern Pueblo people and in the silent, enduring ruins.
These places remind us of the fragile balance between humanity and nature, of how a thriving society can rise, adapt, and eventually fall. The ruins of Chaco and Mesa Verde are echoes of that journey, a story of survival, success, and ultimately mystery.
And maybe that's the greatest legacy of all, one that keeps us searching, wondering, and trying to piece together the puzzle of a people who left so much behind, yet took the heart of their story with them into the unknown.